hacer el ridículo. Hacer el ridículo. This is an interesting phrase. Hacer means to do or to make. It's a verb. And then we have el. El means the without the accent mark. If it has the accent mark, it means he. Okay? And ridículo, it can mean a few things. Ridículo means ridiculous or absurd. Okay, it's similar to that. It's used to describe something that is, that is just absurd. And you need to use that with caution. But this phrase, if you're saying hacer el ridículo, it means something else. It's similar to saying we're talking about something absurd or something ridiculous, but it's a bit different. It's a bit different. Hacer el ridículo. Ridículo. Hacer el ridículo. The whole phrase means to make a fool of oneself. Okay, that happens. You don't want to make a fool of yourself because I don't know, maybe you don't want to dance because you're feeling that you're gonna look like a fool, right? Or you don't want to sing, you don't want to do certain things that might make you look like a fool. I don't think I think people should just not think this way. It's good to try new things. But anyways, hacer el ridículo, it's a common phrase that means to make fool of oneself, or when you feel embarrassed, okay, to embarrass yourself or oneself. And it is used when someone acts in a way that is silly or embarrassing, unintentionally, often unintentionally, and others might laugh because of that. So it's you know what I mean, to make a fool of oneself. Essentially, that is what this phrase means. So let's look at some examples using this phrase. No quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta. No quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta. And by the way, this is not a literal translation of this phrase. Hacer el ridículo is like saying to do something absurd or ridiculous. That's more like the literal translation, but it's very similar to the English phrase to make a fool of oneself. So, no quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta. This means I don't want to make a fool of myself at the party. Maybe it's, you have to wear a costume or something like that, and you're feeling like, no, I look ridiculous. I'm not gonna wear that. I'm just gonna wear normal clothes. So that could be the situation. And let's break this down and let's see how this sentence works. No quiero. Technically, you're saying yo no quiero. We don't need yo. You can just say no quiero, and that means I don't want. If you're adding more to the sentence, it means I don't want to. No quiero can be used by itself, and if you're just saying this just by itself, no quiero, that means I don't want to, right? I don't want to do something. But you can obviously add more to the phrase. If you do, you can add a verb in the infinitive form. Hacer no quiero comer. I don't want to eat. no quiero hacer. I don't want to do or to make something. No quiero correr. I don't want to run. No quiero hablar. I don't want to talk. Okay, so that's an important detail to notice. So, no quiero hacer. I don't want to make. Obviously, we have the phrase we're learning right here. Hacer el ridículo. And that means to make a fool of myself. Even though we're not really changing anything here. But when you say no quiero hacer el ridículo, the whole thing means I don't want to make a fool of myself. En, et, la, the, fiesta, party. You knew this one, right? Fiesta. You knew this one. Fiesta, la fiesta, the party, or just party. So that's quite interesting. Quite interesting. No quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta. I don't want to make a fool of myself at the party. So maybe you can use also this sentence if you want to say, hey, I don't want to get drunk because no quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta, right? So, no quiero beber. I don't want to, or you can say, no quiero emborracharme. I don't want to get drunk. Because no quiero hacer el ridículo en la fiesta. I don't want to make a fool of myself at the party. Interesting. Now, let's look at another example using this phrase. Oh my God. Here we go. Prefiero no hablar en público. Prefiero no hablar en público para no hacer el ridículo. Prefiero no hablar en público para no hacer el ridículo. And this whole thing means I prefer not to speak in public to avoid making a fool of myself. Okay? So that's interesting. And that's very interesting. I always say that, but it's just very, very nice. I don't know. I like to see how, Spanish works and how different English is as well. And it's just nice to understand how both languages work, right? I mean, in this situation, we're focusing in, learning Spanish, but it's nice. It's also nice to see how English works. But anyways, prefiero, yo prefiero. We don't need yo. We don't need it. Forget about it. Yo prefiero means I prefer, or just prefiero means I prefer. Okay. No, we have in English not. In Spanish, no can mean no, can mean not, can mean will not or won't, can mean didn't. Okay, so no can be used in many different ways, but usually it's just a negative word that can just mean no, don't, won't, didn't. It depends on the situation, of course. But when you say prefiero no, that means I prefer not to do something. And you can add a verb right after that. And it has to be in the infinitive form. Okay? So you don't conjugate it. When you say prefiero no hablar, that means I prefer not to speak. Okay? I prefer not to do something. Hablar is the something, and that means speak. En público. Público means public. Okay? It depends on the situation, but essentially, público means public, okay? And it's important to learn this term as well. Hablar en público. That means to speak in public. Para, to, no. I mean, you can say evitar because that's a more literal translation. But when you say para no do something, right? It's similar to saying to avoid. To avoid, but also you can say evitar. Para evitar. Okay? Evitar is a more literal translation of the word avoid. Okay? But you can say either one. Para no hacer. Oops. Para no hacer or para evitar. Okay? Either one works. To avoid, hacer, and we have the phrase we're learning. Hacer el ridículo, making a fool of myself. We have the gerund here to avoid making, but when you say para no, and then you add a verb, it has to be in the infinitive form, not gerund. So don't conjugate the verb. Same with para evitar. If you add a verb right after, it has to be in the infinitive form. Okay? Not the gerund. That's a big difference between English and Spanish. There's a lot of situations where in English you use the gerund, making, cooking, running, so on and so on. And in Spanish, you don't use the gerund in certain situations where in English you do, right? So you would have to use the infinitive form instead. So it's good to pay attention to those details and just make sure to remember that. Excellent. So let's change this a bit up. Let's change it up a little bit, and let's change because here we have, in both examples, we have hacer el ridículo, and here as well, hacer el ridículo, right? So let's just change it to something else. For example, you can say something like ella hizo el ridículo ayer. Something easy, nothing complicated. So that way you see that you can actually conjugate the verb hacer, right? Hacer. So, ella hizo el ridículo ayer. This means, do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? This means she made a fool of herself yesterday. I don't know, maybe she said something, she acted in a way that was a bit odd, right? So you can see here, let's break it down. Let's break this down. So we have ella. Ella means she. Hizo. That's the verb hacer in present tense. So made. Okay. And then the rest of the phrase, el ridículo, a fool of herself. So you don't have to say herself or something similar to this in this situation, in this phrase, because you just need to worry about conjugating the verb hacer, okay? And then add el ridículo. Ella hizo el ridículo Yo hice el ridículo. Ellos hicieron el ridículo. Okay, so just worry about the verb hacer. The rest you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Ayer. Ayer means yesterday. Ayer, yesterday. So remember, hacer el ridículo means to make a fool of oneself. Similar to saying that, it's it's a very common phrase used in all Spanish speaking countries. It's nothing that is specific to, certain country. So just remember that this is a very common term, common phrase that can be used everywhere in the Spanish world. Excellent.